This evening it's September 23rd, and it's a little bit before 6 o'clock tonight. I talked a little bit about what was happening with the state and different individuals sort of obstructing, causing a lot of problems, to create a lot of stress in my life after I had my son. And one of the things that I did have to do for this fair hearing court thing that I went to was I had to show why I wasn't required to submit a social security number for my son. And by law, if your child doesn't have a social security number, your baby doesn't, or if you were forced into taking one, they can't require you to use that for your child, even if you're on welfare or having any kind of state assistance, regardless of what it is. So I had gone to the Social Security Administration offices, which are in a federal building in Wenatchee, Washington, and that federal building has the post office for Wenatchee. It has an agricultural department, and it has the FBI offices, which is a very small room, sort of a cafeteria, a few other things, and then it has the Social Security Administration or department. So I had to go there, and I gave them a letter in person stating that I wanted to have, there were two options. If someone is forced to take a social security number, like under threat, it's illegal. That's against the law. And if that happens, then the way that you can remedy this is by, there are two different options. One option is to have it rescinded, and the other option is to have it revoked. And rescinded and revoked are sort of the same thing, and I'm hoping that my terminology is correct, because it was something like that. They were very similar processes, just like the words are very similar, rescinded and revoked. But depending on which one was used, it was a little bit different. So there was one process where you could have the number rescinded, which meant if a number was issued to your child, you could have it like put into hiding, basically, like kind of taken back and taken off of your child's account, and it gets rescinded back into the system. But then once they are 16 years old, or however old they are when they need a social security number to work, then when that number is issued again and it's revived, it's basically revived. So even though it is latent, it's like in hibernation for an untold number of years. As soon as the child does become of age and requests that number, or the parent requests the number for some reason, the original number that was issued is the one that's given. So that's the process for having a number rescinded. Having the number revoked, there was a different process for that. And having it revoked meant that the number gets destroyed and there is no number, period. So a number that was issued to the child, for whatever reason, is completely destroyed and revoked. And so basically when this child takes a new number, when they need one for work or for whatever reason, they take an entirely new number that gets generated at the time that they apply for it, wherever on the scale of however those social security numbers are issued, however that works. So from looking at the different options, because I was threatened and coerced into taking this number for my son, and because it was such a bad situation, I didn't want my son's number simply rescinded. and put into quote-unquote hiding until he got a new number, or until he applied for it again. I wanted the number completely eradicated and revoked. So I wanted it destroyed and to have a clean slate for him as not having any number unless he applied for one. And so the Social Security Department administration actually sent me a letter telling me they had rescinded it or whatever, but they used that one word that meant they put it in hiding, basically. So I wrote to them again saying I didn't want it to be rescinded. I wanted it specifically to be revoked, to be destroyed. And I listed the laws and the different things that applied to that. And again, it was right about that time that then my son and I were being tortured, because it was after that fair hearing and after I was going through that whole process and about the time that I was also meeting this person from Cuba that my son and I were then tortured at Met-How. So when I wasn't treated, I never found out because of what was happening to both me and my son, and because of the things that were all of the things that were being thrown at me by the state, and then CPS, people started retaliating against me and reporting me to CPS for things that were just to harass me. And when all of those things were thrown my way, I kept asking the Social Security Department to make sure that it was revoked, but I never heard back from them about that, and I kept asking for a response, but they never replied. So now it's many years later, and I recently had to go to the Social Security office and ask about some of my work history and different things, and they did find my son's name in association with my name, and yet they said they had no record whatsoever of any letter from me to them in their system, and they had no record of my son's number having been rescinded or whatever. What they did have a record of is that as soon as Washington State took my son away from me, which happened later, one of the first things they did was go to a knowing CPS, with CPS and the Social Services Department having lost a fair hearings case to me, they retaliated against me and got revenge by taking my son from me and then going to Spokane and having a new Social Security number issued to my son. And they knew that that was against my wishes, and that was against my philosophies, and my parental rights had not been terminated. So I had a right to have, by law, to have all of my parental wishes respected. There was no cause. They knew that I'd specifically had his number revoked, and they went out and signed up for a number for him to retaliate against me after they were basically sore losers. And this is after, that's the hearing where Donna Titleman perjured herself in court, and where the judge tried to write me up as sounding crazy. His name was Michael, something or other. I'd have to look at his last name. But he tried to write me up as sounding paranoid and belittled me. Even though I won, he still belittled me and made a point to do that. And that was also about the time that Washington State decided not to reimburse me for the travel costs that I had, which they were telling me that I had to have. So Washington State did some really illegal things against me. And I tried to file for a fair hearings to contest the fact that they hadn't paid me. And nobody ever, basically during that time when I was being harassed and all those things were coming up, I put in my request several times the way that it's supposed to be done, and nobody ever sent me a hearing notice. They ignored me. They thought that they could ignore me. And the only time that they paid attention and went ahead and made a pretense of putting something together was years later. And then another thing came up through CPS which blocked me from being able to participate in that matter. And I was being tortured, and so they basically made sure that I couldn't attend to that fair hearing that was assigned. And even though I didn't show up, I think that I still have a right to contest what happened because of the fact that they didn't honor my original request to have the hearing when I asked for it. And they've done a lot of illegal things to prevent me from having any kind of stability so that I could attend to addressing their crimes. They are crimes against not only me but my son. So right around that time, there were a bunch of people who really didn't want me to be filing a medical malpractice lawsuit, and who were working with people in Oregon to cover up crimes there, and then crimes that then, you know, happen in the same way over here, or over there in Washington. And, I mean, crimes first occurring in Oregon and then also in Washington. And the FBI didn't want me going to the OIG, and, you know, was fighting that. The Portland PD hated me. You know, a lot of them. Maybe not all of them, but... And then I had these medical facilities that were trying to do some really horrible things, and they were banning me from all the medical clinics. And actually, when I had to go to the hearings for that, I basically saw people from Oregon that I'd had litigation with, visiting and with people who were in Wenatchee, who were lawyers in Wenatchee. And I think that the people in Wenatchee were taking tips and getting advice from people who had basically had done some really illegal things to ruin my case in Oregon, my cases in Oregon. So all of a sudden I had these hearings that I had to attend to in this keeps falling, in Wenatchee. And one of them was basically telling me that I was banned from going to the emergency room for migraines, because after Dr. Butler withdrew this pain contract, he basically told everybody that I was crazy, and that I didn't have, or that there was something wrong with me, you know, maybe on that end, when there wasn't. And he also said that I was a drug user. So he withdrew this pain contract, and I was trying to go to the emergency room because I was being assaulted with migraines again. And then I was being refused treatment again. So while I'm being assaulted with migraines, these lawyers scheduled hearings in Wenatchee, and the hearings were basically set up to I just heard something outside, so just listening real quick to hear what it is. Actually, hang on just a second, because that might be deer in my garden. Okay, I don't see any right now. So, where was I? Basically, they had me then scheduled for hearings. I had to go to court and basically prove that I needed access to the emergency room for migraines. And I didn't have a regular doctor, a primary care doctor, because all of these doctors were blacklisting me and telling me that I couldn't go to their clinics. And they knew that I was trying to sue for medical malpractice. And there were specific individuals trying to make it look like I was causing disruptions at the clinics when I never was. So there was this one woman, named a nurse by the name of Allison, and there was an Irish-American guard from Wenatchee Valley Clinic, and they kind of worked together in tandem. She was always complaining about me whenever he was there, and then if I was there in person, he was escorting me everywhere like I was a problem. And over the phone, she harassed me. She was Catholic, and she harassed me to no end, just over and over and over. I can't tell you how much I was harassed by her, and she was deliberately trying to provoke me. She would hang up on me. She